Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Friday edition of Teamwork a Better Way. I'm Christian Napier, and I am joined by my well-traveled colleague and close friend, Spencer Horn. Spencer, how you doing?
I am fantastic, Christian. I am so excited to be back for a short time and be with you, my intelligent friend, my one that I always lean on for, sanity, keep me grounded. So glad that we're together today.
Yeah, me as well. And glad that you can be back and enjoy the beautiful autumn leaves that we're seeing now here in the state. I don't know if you've had a chance to get up in the mountains and take a look around, but it's really, really beautiful.
No, I haven't. I've seen them and they're calling to me. I've been on the road and I'm just like I was back in Connecticut, so I saw a few of the colors there. They were just starting to turn, but here in the mountains they are spectacular. Anyway, that's you're right. I need to get up there.
All right. Well, maybe you can enjoy a relaxing weekend and do that. But my guess is that you're going to be super busy. And speaking of super busy, we are now going to talk with someone who is super busy himself and has graciously carved an hour out of his schedule to come and talk with us today. So, Spencer, why don't you go ahead and introduce him to everybody?
Absolutely. Today, our guest is Nicolas Pokorny, and he is. I had an opportunity to meet him, and his topic is so right up our alley, Christian. He is really a neuroscientist turned global business leader. He's the founder and CEO of Mammoth Leadership Sciences. He's not just your typical leadership expert. He's a neuroscientist with a PhD in human behavior and an MBA. And so he's got that, a really unique perspective on what makes organizations tick and go. And he spent over 30 years leading marketing and sales teams. So these are teams that are all about performance. And I think that's, how to get them to perform. If you can do that, those principles can apply everywhere. And he's done that all around the globe, translating cutting edge science into transformative business results. And so, as this founder and CEO of Mammoth Leadership Sciences, he's combined academic rigor, which we love, with real world leadership experience, which we love even more. And he's helped companies dive really into driving global growth and with record breaking innovation and inclusive team cultures that actually work because they're built on how people really behave, which is something I always love to learn about. So let's bring in Nicolas. Welcome. So glad that you're able to join us. You're coming to us from Boston. Is that right? Just outside of Boston?
Yes, just outside of Boston, and yeah, thank you very much for having me. The honor is purely on my side, really.
Well, thank you. And we you have a book which I did not mention called the Mammoth in the Room, and
Yes.
how great leaders. Yeah, you're going to hopefully show that off. We'll talk a little bit about it as we go, but it's really about how great leaders and their teams embrace evolutionary truth and outstanding. It's not only a metaphor, the Mammoth in the Room. It's real life. And so you talk about the evolutionary development of teams from, let's call it, prehistoric times till today. Could you describe that whole concept of the mammoth and what that means to have that mammoth in the room to today's teams?
Yeah. So the book, I have to say, was it was a labor of love over many years, actually 2 decades. My original exposure to what later became a leadership topic was as a neuro scientist, and the studies I did and all the uh, different universities I was at. I mean, it's very clear from a neurobiological perspective what drives human behavior, right? So everything what humans and any other species do is behavior, and the behavior is shaped by the interactions of genetics and environment, and there's none of this is more important. It's like a recipe and the ingredients of a cake, and from an evolutionary standpoint, humans will always behave in a way that maximize the outcomes for themselves, their offspring, and all those they are related to. From a relationship perspective, from they are depending on, and no one sacrifices oneself for somebody else. Without having any addition, any personal outcomes as well. I mean, we know that since Darwin, game theory, biology 101. So that was the original neuroscientific approach. That's what I studied. And then I had the honor when I finished my studies to go into business. And that's a different story by itself, how I ended up there. But in this movement from science into business, I understood pretty early on when I had the honor to lead teams that as business leaders, we are not leading the business, but we are leading the people who do the business. And that means we're actually leading human behavior. And that very often is what I call the mammoth in the room, because when business issues are coming up, people are talking about strategy, about the next slide, about the implementation, and so forth, when actually the real reason is why something goes wrong or maybe could go better, because the being human comes in between. And humans are greedy. Humans like shortcut. Humans try to dominate others, and so on and so forth. And I think that is what actually drives business, drives the culture. And that was the whole concept about the mammoth. And the reason why we called it the mammoth in the room is because it's lurking everywhere. It's so big. And everyone kind of sees it, but we are not really looking at this. And I can't go into many more details, but I want to stop here for a moment. Yeah.
Well, it's so big that according to a study that you reference in your book, The Potential Project, 35,000 managers were interviewed, and of those employees, 65% of them want their boss fired. 82% of them are not motivated by their managers. And 70% of managers actually think that they are motivating. I have lots of research that, according to psychologist Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, 80% of leaders think they're better than average, right? So we have this overestimation of our impact, and really there's a gap, and you talk about the gap, and 75% of people quit because of bosses. That absolutely is a pervasive problem.
Yeah. And, as an example, right, you're sitting in a boardroom, and you have your strategy build out, and everything is really nice, and you have researched everything, and you're trying to get your project through or your strategy through, but you don't get that through. And the reason why you're not getting through is because maybe Christian has a certain connection to the CEO. The CEO just came from another company, and their an innovation initiative didn't go well, and that's why he's maybe having a status quo bias, which is one of our evolutionary biases, that it is better to stay where we are and not move too much because it could be risky, and over evolution, risky movements could have jeopardized survival. So all of these things are lurking in the back, sometimes very clear, somebody very, very clearly, people can see that. But you're not challenging your CEO because for the same reasons he might be wrong in this very case. He has all the power to maybe, prevent your next promotion. So all of these things are happening at the same time in every minute, in every business meeting, consciously, unconsciously. And the reason why it sometimes leads to not the optimal outcome is not because of the human nature. It is because of the not knowledge about the human nature. And that is what we're trying to address with the book, and what we're trying to address with my weekly podcast, and also with the Leadership Academy, which will come on in a couple of months.
Okay, I find this topic fascinating. I want to come back to uh, this question that, or not question, it was something that you just brought up, which was about um, people like the status quo. They don't like change. They don't want to move. So this is not an academic reference. This is a total pop culture reference. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the movie World War Z.
Yes.
Brad Pitt was the star of the movie. It's about zombies, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a point in the movie where uh, he and his family they walk into this apartment building in New Jersey, and they actually kind of get invited in to a residence there in the apartment by a family that is living there. And uh, Brad Pitt, the protagonist, says after a respite, "We need to get moving. We got to go." And the family's like, "No, we don't want to go. We're just going to stay here." And he says, "In my experience," in his character is like a UN worker, right, who works in high conflict zones. And he says, "In my experience, the people that survive are the people that move," right? And so he and his family leave. The other family stays, and as predicted, the other family gets infected by the virus and becomes zombies, and Brad Pitt's family survives. Uh, and so uh, with that backdrop, I asked the question, like, okay, how is it that we, from an evolutionary perspective, have come up with tendencies that
Mm-hmm.
actually may be counterproductive, right? Uh, well, we believe it's safe to stay put, but actually, the safer thing is to move.
To
Yeah.
do what
So,
feels risky.
right. So I'm curious from your perspective, having studied this your entire life, how is it that through this process of thousands of years, we've actually developed some tendencies that at the end are counterproductive, but we cling to those anyway?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think when we talk about being that it is counterproductive, it's counterproductive for our current environment. It was not counterproductive for the hundreds and thousands and even millions of years as the genus Homo actually evolved, right? Depending on the source, genus Homo came up somewhere between 1.7, 2.4 million years ago, evolved through different species. Today we only have Homo sapiens, which is around 300,000 years old. There's no other species within Homo still available. We killed everyone else. And over these thousands and hundreds thousands of years, imagine the way how we lived, right? We lived maybe in a certain valley or in a certain place, and there was the we hunted for the same animals, we ate the same things, and everything was pretty predictable. And if you think about it, let's go, I don't know, 40,000 years ago, you had your beautiful valley, you lived there since generations. And then somebody came, well, I believe that in 3 years from now, um, there could be a flood coming. And, and that's why we should leave, right? And people would have called this person nuts because you cannot just leave at the time where your survival depends on what you actually do from day to day to day. So it was much more safe to not move or to move in a very predicted way, in a way like we always moved, to behave in a way like we always behaved. Why? Because since generations and generations and generations, this was the right thing to do. So in that environment, the traits which were rather staying helped much more for survival than the ones who just said, you know what, I just leave now and I go alone and I just walk through the other side of the mountain and try to explore things. You did that normally when you had to. Now, That over hundreds and thousands and millions of years was a survival plan, and the survival that was what survival depended upon. Now, think about the last couple seconds of our evolution. And when I talk about this, sometimes I need to chuckle, because when you take the Homo sapiens evolution, I mean, what we're talking now, the last, since the industrial evolution, we're really talking the last seconds of this evolution. And in this evolution, in this part in this last in these seconds, right? Everything is changing basically constantly. I mean, the technology is changing, AI is changing. So you have to basically throw this feeling about I want to stay safe overboard, because if you are not moving, if you are saying, for instance, I don't want to embrace AI, you will lose out. So you have to, just simply because our environment is changing so quickly, you have to overcome this feeling that change is something which inherently you actually don't like. And even in my book, I write about change always feels difficult or inconvenient. And this is for two reasons. The reason number one is, when your business is running great and somebody says, hey, we have to change, we have to transform, then the answer is very often, well, don't fix what's not broken. So then the thinking of changing something which really works, I mean, think of Kodak, think of Nokia, think of Blockbuster. That feels very scary, right? Because you would give up what really works. But then companies wait, and then suddenly you have to change, because suddenly something is really happening. Digital cameras are suddenly here, right? And software is suddenly replacing hardware. And that's the moment where change again feels completely inconvenient and terrible, because then you have to change from one moment to the other. The next innovation would have to be there already yesterday. So change is something we have a very controversial relationship with. We always tell our companies and our people, and when I'm standing on the stage and say, hey, we have to change, and then people say, I love change. Well, no one really loves change. What you should learn to love is gradual transformation. And that is what we're also promoting in the book, The Mammoth in the Room with a Certain Business Model.
But as you said, with the VUCA world that exists today, is that gradual transformation even possible? How do we make how do we create a mindset where the change is what is steady, right? But you also mentioned it takes so much energy for us to change, right? So it's easier, it conserves energy if we do things the same way over and over again. But you're also advocating for disrupting your own business, is what I'm hearing you say, because if you wait for the outside forces to change you, now you're behind the curve. And if you can get proactive, that's what I want to understand. So let's shift into that, because you've already talked about the idea that there's a difference today. The leaders don't lead the business. You talk about this. They lead the people, and the people do the work of the business. So why clarify why then so many leaders get stuck in the weeds of the business and forget about that their job is the people?
That's my goodness. That's a very good question. So I think the main reason is because people don't reflect that element of the business that is actually leading the people. I also learned that the hard way, because I also remember when I got my first leadership role, I was a great product manager. I was good in building detail aids. I was good in organizing conventions. And then one day, my boss came to me and said, now, Nicolas, now you're ready. Now you lead a team of 8 people. And I was like, great. So basically the qualification for leading the people leading 8 people was the fact that I was a good product manager, which is completely nuts, but that's happening all the time. So what did I have at that time? I had my company slides. I had my headquarter trained, maybe brainwashed, brain about what do you want to do. So I'm going into my first business meeting with all the slides I got, and drumming, the corporate Kool-Aid, and I'm leading with the business. But then later on, very shortly afterwards, I find out, hold on a second, my people are actually maybe not so much interested in the business itself, because first and foremost, they are interested in themselves, in their well-being, that they can pay the rent. I just think that people don't reflect that way. And 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 did I make these mistakes myself? Of course I did. But because of my background, the way I reflected on that, I learned pretty quickly that you can't do it that way. What you have to do is, you can't lead with the business goals. You have to lead with the goals of the people who do the business, and then work with them to merge their individual goals about the career, about the family, about whatever they want to achieve with the company goals. So basically telling them, look, you want to become, a marketing leader. You want to go into this department one day. Okay, if we achieve our business goals together, this is how you can achieve this in this company, and then you work on it, right? And I completely changed my approach when I have the honor to lead a new team. My first conversation is not going in and say, hey, here is what we need to achieve with our company. My first conversation with every team member is, what do you want to achieve in your life in the next 3, 5, 7 years? And then work on that. And then we can merge the person's goals with the company goals. That is what I call transformation in leadership, because then you're not leading transactionally. I give you salary if you do this. No, we're talking things about, how can you develop? How can you learn more? How can you become a better person? That's the approach which actually really builds a culture where everything else is possible.
I love that, and what you were describing earlier kind of reminds me of what's called the fundamental attribution error, right? I mean, we look at other people and we judge their intentions based on their impact only on us. So if you're late to work, I assume because you're late to work that you don't care about your job. When in fact, you're probably late to work because you've got some things going on. Your car broke down. It has nothing to do with the fact that but I judge your actions based on how it impacts me. Yeah. And so I attribute your behavior in a negative way, but then we judge ourselves, right? Those 77% of managers think they motivate everybody else. We judge ourselves and our motives by our intentions, even if they don't have the right impact. That's that fundamental attribution error that we have. And so I love the fact if you can stop and say, listen, the business goals are going to happen. They're going to happen when I help individuals get their goals. What do you think about that, Christian?
Yeah. Well, I think this is great. I agree with all of it. Super fascinating for me. I want to come back, Nicolas, to some of the statistics that Spencer was mentioning earlier about the very high percentages of people who have negative feelings toward their superiors, right? So it seems to be that's kind of the general rule of thumb, is people don't appreciate or like or whatever their bosses. And I am curious if there is an evolutionary foundation for this, if people are naturally inclined to have negative feelings to their leaders, if that's something that's just kind of gone through history, and then how that is overcome. It sounds to me like the recipe for overcoming any kind of inherent negative feeling, if that is in fact a thing, is to do what you just described, which is to demonstrate that first and foremost, you care about them as people, as individuals. You are interested in and invested in their goals. and them achieving their personal outcomes. And then, as a beneficial side effect of that, our organization flourishes. What are your thoughts about we potentially having like inherent negative biases toward leaders?
So I think we need to go way back again in evolution when we, first wandered this planet. The first groups of human beings, let's just call it in general human beings, were fiercely egalitarian groups where they were small, like families, maybe 2 or 3 families, maybe 20, 50, 100 people max. And at that time, leadership was very much task related. So everyone had a certain maybe specialty. And you didn't have this one leader very early on who led everything just because and dominated everything else. And so let's say, and leadership roles changed per task, right? So I might be the one who knows how to build a ship, so we can when we have to move, we can build a ship or a boat over a river. But then Spencer, you're the expert of finding the next fertile soil. Once we are on the other side of the river, I say, look, Spencer, you got to lead us now because I don't really know. So it was very egalitarian, very discussed. And when people tried to dominate others, human behavior developed some behaviors which actually kept these people in check. You started to ridicule people. You started to, maybe throw them out. So that was very early on, but it was for a very, very long period of time. Later on, and that's wired in us. We are principally egalitarian people. We like to be heard. We like to be part of discussions, of decisions. Now, later on, obviously, when the groups grew bigger, there were 2 reasons why we developed something like hierarchy. And at the moment, I'm actually running my podcast. At the moment is having a couple of episodes about this. Hierarchy developed with 2 reasons. One, when these groups grew, it became there were fierce intergroup competition for resources, for soil, and for everything like that. And it turned out to be that a hierarchical society was able to outperform a non-hierarchical society. So if somebody was there who was a leader, and could make like maybe 1,000 people move in lockstep in a certain fight, that outperformed societies where 1,000 people had no plan, but they were all equal, and then they tried to defend themselves or whatever, right? So that was one reason. The other one was also communication, because imagine, you can have a decision-making process where everyone is heard with 30 people. You can't have that with 300, 3,000, 30,000, or whatever, right? So that is why you needed to build hierarchies. Now, what comes with hierarchies is that at some point there are people somewhere at the top. And when these people then start to, not give back in the right way, when they start to dominate, when they start to,
you talked about greed, right? They become greedy.
That people take more out of the system, then our deeply evolutionary egalitarian brain doesn't like that. And that is why very often we have an issue with our leaders. Now, we don't have issues with leaders who are living the humbleness, who are living vision, who are living competence, who also roll out their sleeves. I can tell you one thing. Whenever I had a manager who showed respect, who, was grateful for what I did, who did not tell me do this, but was at the side of me and said, hey, I help you. I never had an issue with that kind of manager or boss, or whatever you want to call it. And I can tell you, No one has an issue with somebody who is decent, visionary, humble, doesn't try to show off. I'm the best, I'm the biggest, I'm the most wonderful. No one has an issue with that. But the problem is people don't see that very often because we're not training our people correctly and we're not talking about human behavior when we go to business school. People become leader and then they think because they are at the top of the org chart, they're the leader, right? And they don't know the reflect from one moment to the other. They have all the power. They decide about promotion. They decide about salary. They decide about next steps. They decide about the families, because if somebody gets a promotion or not has an impact on your family, on your house, on what you can pay. But all of these things are deeply, deeply interconnected. And the people we're talking here, or the managers who are not loved, and to be very clear, I also was for sure, and maybe still am every now and then because I make mistakes. A leader, the people who are working with me maybe don't like that much when I make a mistake. I was somebody who, thought originally, okay, I'm the leader now. I was actually told I was actually told to behave leaderly. I was told so many times in my career, Nicolas, speak up, say something, show your leadership. And I was always trying to resist it when I had the feeling I shouldn't talk now because there are other people in my team who know better. But then when my boss says, now say something, then I said something and then I messed up because
so interesting. So interesting that you say that. I mean, I was talking to a lieutenant colonel, Nicolas, that worked in the Pentagon in Washington D.C., and she's part of this group with generals, right? And the general rewards people with certain behaviors, the ones that are brash and are speaking up and say exactly what they think all the time. Her personality is such that she actually needs time to think and process, and so she's always slower to the game when it comes to say. And she has great ideas and great perspectives, but that leader punishes her behavior because he rewards the people who don't think, who just speak. And because that's what they perceive a leader is. And so it's actually limited her opportunities to be a leader, even though she has great qualities of leader that put people first and come up with great ideas. It's so interesting that your boss actually did the same thing to you, saying you need to be that kind of leader.
And also that has a big evolutionary reason because we're talking here situations about there is a strategy, you want to push the strategy through, you still have your salary. There's no real risk in our business world if you're here, right? Unless you are self-employed, unless you have your own business, if you work for a big corporation, what is the real risk? If Spencer maybe, messes up this one strategy, okay, right? There's a team behind it and so on and so forth. In former times, for thousands and hundreds, thousands of years, the people who spoke up the most confident, the one who actually let's go back to our to this example about the river, right? Let's say we all three in the same group of few people who go through the woods and we find this river and we need to go over that river.
I like the sound of it, don't you, Christian? I want to go through the river over the.
You want to go through
Absolutely.
it, right? So I only speak up that I know how to build that boat if I really do it, if I really know it, because there is no time for bragging. The KPIs are checked immediately because if I say I can build the boat and then it sinks, guess what? I'm out immediately and I'm also dead. So over the years and years and years of evolution,
KPIs have been separated from the.
Could say, I know were the ones to be followed. Now, in the last seconds of our evolution, that kind of, hey, you need to be confident is still here. And it's interesting because there's also a lot of literature out there that the people who brag the most, who are the confident the most, they get these great jobs in the company because they're not only convincing the people who are hiring, they are also seen as more confident.
Nicolas, I see that all the time, and it's a mistake. Hey, we have a comment from our audience. Would you like? Can I put it up on the screen? Here we go. So this is from Kevin. Kevin, thanks for listening. He says, serial adaptation is required of most systems to prevent atrophy and promote serial growth. Seasons of cyclical change to shape up the homeostasis. I believe it is God's perfect design for healthy systems to address the natural law of entropy. Any thoughts on what Martin has to say?
Well, I do think when I'm trying this, and I hope I get it right, transfer this into business, that is what we are actually um, uh, promoting in the business model we have in the book. You want to constantly transform. You want to have constantly a think tank who actually um, is constantly working on the next evolution of how the business will run. There are two big change processes, categories. One is the evolutionary change process, where you just incremental steps, and I think this is what the gentleman or lady, I don't know, who said that means incremental steps, where you try to predict the future and where you adapt over time. As a good example, you guys have this amazing podcast. It's probably safe to say that in 10 years from now, the technology will look different. So you will not work the next 10 years and not change anything on the technology. No, you do this adaptation constantly so that you stay on top of the game. That's the evolutionary part of doing things because things are moving. Now, the other change process is the revolutionary change process, and that's terrible. That is what most companies do, right? That from one moment to the other, you have to change, and that is when the deep things, the bad things happen, because then you try to, um, somehow manage your shareholders, and then you have to, you get the P&L right, and you let people go. Right? But you wouldn't have to do this, because if you would have seen before that the technology is changing 3 years ago, and you would have them step by step, it wouldn't be needed. I mean, the business history is full of that. If you think about Kodak is a wonderful example. They invented the digital camera. But because when they saw it, and it came inside from an engineer, from a team they had, they said, no, we are the experts in film. And if we would bring this onto the market, we would jeopardize our current revenue, our current business model. What they should have done, and of course, hindsight 2020, I'm not saying I would have done it. I might have been in the same evolutionary trap that these guys was at the time. But the right thing to do would have been, okay, let's use this and let's work how we transform the current business into the next step of the business. And I think this is what we mean with that. Step by step changes over time. But you need to do this consciously. You have to do this, and you can't do this with the same people who are responsible for the performance every single day, because they have to focus on today's perspective. But you have to have a think tank which thinks, okay, this is what pays the rent today. How will that look like in 1 year, in 3 years, in 5 years?
All right. So if I understand from what you were saying, Nicholas, when it comes to change, the podcast examples, I think, a really interesting one, because technologies come and we adapt those. When we started doing this podcast, it was an audio podcast and we didn't really do the video thing. And then that's kind of evolved to where it is today, and it will continue to evolve. I acknowledge that. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is, in addition to accommodating evolutionary change, revolutionary change requires foresight. And sometimes not all of the facts are known, right? Like you mentioned the digital camera thing. Who knew at the time where that industry would go? And quite honestly, the digital camera thing got eaten up by smartphones. Like,
Yeah, that's a big thing. Absolutely.
Right. So
BlackBerry. That's a good example with BlackBerry and Apple. Yeah.
right.
100%.
So I'm curious. I love looking at these things through this evolutionary lens that you've given us. I think it's so interesting. Um, you know, where does that come from? This foresight, this ability for certain leaders to have a vision, to take us someplace where 95% of us have no idea,
To break out of our
and
biology.
right,
Yeah.
and to take a leap of faith to follow this visionary leader, right? That this, maybe in the old times they could be prophets or something like this, but today, those visionary leaders that have some type of foresight that maybe the rest of us do not. Like, where does that come from, this ability to have this kind of foresight, that maybe from an evolutionary perspective most of us are good with the evolutionary change, struggle with that revolutionary change?
Yeah, I just the revolutionary. I think yeah, it's a very good question. So the I think one of the most important things is that you just reflect on what you are actually prone to as a human being. Knowing that there are things like an anchoring trap or like a sunk cost fallacy or a framing trap and all these things, just being aware that these happen, status quo bias makes things a lot easier. Um, let's assume for a moment for a team meeting and you are deciding on a strategy. How great would it be if someone speaks up and says, hold on, guys, the team is educated on it, and say, are we maybe falling into the status quo trap? Are we not moving in that direction because we're just afraid because of blah, 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 blah? Just having that notion of a filter helps a lot. The question is, who are these people who are visionary and maybe can predict the next leap of development? I think I when I came across people who were like that, they were always very deep thinkers. They were not jumpers to the next. Somebody's doing this, I need to jump. Somebody's doing this, I need to jump. No, they always went their own way. Now here I'm leaving a little bit the evolution because this is more like a personal trait, right? I saw people who were deep thinkers and also took intelligent risk. And what I mean intelligent risk is risk on intelligence. Um, you I don't think these. I don't know if I can rule it out completely, but these big leaps are coming from, I would say, from very reflective people um, who are actively thinking about what the future will look like, and then are risk taker without jeopardizing the current business, and that is what, or the current situation. That is what I also have in our dynamic stability business model, which is in the book, where the first step is secure what pays the rent today. That's always the best, the most important thing. And then there is a gradual, it's a gradual framework how you can move towards thinking how the future will look like. But the ones who then make these decisions, they are thinkers, they are not erratic, they are intelligent risk takers. They have a vision, they are visionary. And then I think the last thing, what's also very important, is they are good storytellers, because you need to get people behind your story, the higher purpose. I'm a scientist and I know one thing: data don't sell, not at all. The second dot after the digit doesn't sell. What sells is a story behind it. And that is also very, very evolutionary, because over hundreds of thousands of years, we didn't write, we didn't text, we didn't Slack, we didn't whatever. We just told stories from one generation to the next. So our brain is wired to understand stories. And I think that is, in this short time we have, I think that the hallmarks of leaders who can predict, and predicting is probably even the wrong word, but who can lead us to the leap of this, to this next step change in whatever it is.
So if you were designing a leadership training for a Fortune 500, say, execs from scratch, based on these evolutionary truths, the first thing that you teach them, what is that?
That is some ground rules about human behavior. And I think the most important thing is giving people a good outline what human behavior is, but also showing the people the complexity of what they're actually up for. Because if you think about it, as a leader, you have to manage the following. Every person lives first and foremost for him or herself. We are not sacrificing us for a company, right? I mean, it's ridiculous to say, Spence, if you call me one day and say, hey, Nicholas, I want you to work for 20% more the next 3 years because our company is not very well, and I want to pay you 20% less. And I also want you to reject every single great offer of the companies in between who offer you 20% more for 20% less work, right? That's complete. And because, Nicholas, you're such a great team player, you will do this, correct? That's complete bullshit. No one would do this. So the first thing is a leader needs to navigate a team where everyone, first and foremost, works for himself, herself, family, and so on and so forth. The second one thing is people and mankind is so great because we can collaborate. Nothing has been done alone as a human being, always to collaborate, right? So you have to have people who are for themselves. They need to collaborate to achieve their goals. And number three, they're in competition to each other. Because, Christian, if you leave as the department lead of our 8-people department, if you leave at the end of the year and you become the whatever next general manager of something else, and you need a successor, guess what? We 8 need to compete against each other if there is a chance that one of us can get it. So a leader needs to understand people work for themselves. Number 2, they have to collaborate, which is somehow sometimes already a little bit of a contradiction. And then thirdly, they are in competition to each other. And all the biology and all the psychology behind it, that is the first step, what we need to teach our people, and we don't do that.
He's like describing the movie "It's a Wonderful Life," in my opinion. You've got George Bailey, right, and his whole focus, and his father's focus was to lend money to people so that they could have a life, that they could afford things and not take advantage of them. But of course, Mr. Potter, the cynical guy who wants to take advantage of everything and just squeeze everybody for every last dollar, just like you talked about that leader. He's the one who. Who's like, you're a sucker if you put people's interests first. And of course, when you do that, you really get people engaged to solve the problems of the community, and they want to help you instead of bring the pitchforks when things don't go right and burn, create a revolution when they're not treated fairly. So, I mean, it's interesting how we can do that internally with our own organizations by activating people's primal need for self-interest to actually help them generate the engagement for the business. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Absolutely. And I think what comes with it is, and this is always so fascinating, we always talk about leadership, but we never talk about followership. Yeah. And that is something which needs to be much more, it needs to get much more attention, right? If you think about what leadership is from a behavior perspective, leadership is the solving a coordination problem of 2 or more specimen of one species, right? So what was the coordination problems human needed to solve? Movement, because once we have hunted our area, eaten everything, or a season was coming and winter is coming, we needed to move. But then the question is, who moves first? And then where do we move, right? So somebody needs to move, and then somebody needs to follow. Now, how often are we in situations where the leader, let me rephrase, the one who is on top of the org chart is the one who talks the most, shows the power, is cranky when somebody has a different opinion, and makes the decisions. Although he or she and everyone in the room knows that person isn't actually the one who is really good at that. Now, followership is something which is a very important trait of good leaders. You need to be a good follower. I need to know when I need to lead. I need to know when I need to maybe look at it. And I also need to know when I need to just follow, because the person in my team is the expert on this, and I'm way better off in shutting it up and just following, right? And that is not something we normally teach. When you look at LinkedIn, LinkedIn is a beautiful example. We're all leaders. We also never did anything wrong. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, which has been rated as one of the best 5%,
Mine too. I've never done anything wrong.
Right? And I'm also constantly contacted because I'm a great leader. I have nowhere that I'm a great follower and that I learned to follow. Because if I would write that, I might be a better leader, but people would not contact me because it was Nicolas is a follower. How terrible. Nicolas needed to learn to follow in order to lead correctly in certain situations. No?
That's right.
Well, holy cow. We've been talking for almost an hour.
Yeah.
This time has flown by.
With no video bumpers or promotions. We just didn't have time. So
yeah. Well, the other thing is, you touched on something that is really near and dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about, which is storytelling. Because I do believe that it is one of, if not the most effective ways to build emotional connection and community with people. So maybe we can do that another time. But Spencer, I don't know if you've got some final questions to wrap up here with Nicolas, but before you do, I just want to say, Nicolas, that it was really an honor to have you on here today, and I'll transition over here to Spencer for his kind of final wrap up.
Thank you, and Kevin, we see your other comment. Thank you for that. We're running out of time, but basically, I have a couple questions. What's the most outdated leadership myth you hear all the time?
The most outdated leadership myth. That's a good question. We do something because the boss says so.
Yeah. Right. You need to speak up more, right? One thing every leader should stop doing today.
Promoting, taking the success of the people and selling it as his or her own.
What's more powerful in the workplace, fear or reward?
Oh, reward, 100%. In a positive way.
Yeah. Introvert or extrovert? You'd rather lead which team?
You mean as a leader, if I'm extrovert or introvert?
Yeah, you'd rather lead which team? A team of introverts or a team of extroverts?
I don't care.
What's your leadership pet peeve?
Leadership what?
What's your leadership pet peeve?
Pet peeve. That's a vocabulary issue.
A pet peeve meaning something that bothers you. What's a good Austrian? I don't know. Something where someone steps on, it just drives you nuts, bugs you.
Oh, drives me nuts. When leaders say something, but you know from the body language that it is out of a cookbook. It is because they are told to say so when they don't mean it, and it's happening all the time.
Yes. One book besides yours that every leader should read.
Leaders Eat Last.
Strategy or culture, which comes first?
Culture.
What would you tell your 30-year-old self about leadership?
It's not about you. It's about your people.
Okay, finish this sentence. The future of leadership is.
knowing our past as humans.
Oh, that's great. You know what, Christian? I'd love for him to be able to promote his book. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's give you a moment to talk about that. Uh, Tell us a little bit more about your book, The Mammoth in the Room, and how people can find it.
Well, I have it here. I think it wasn't even on the showcase. So that's the book. I don't know if you can see it. That's the Mammoth in the Room. Um, you can find it everywhere, Amazon and everywhere, basically. And it really it 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 deals with three different chapters. One is on three sections: on people, on strategy, and implementation. The most important one is on people, where we just go back, take a step back and try to understand how humans behave. That is the crux of everything. Once you've understood that, you go to the strategy, because then you can apply how all what you learn on people helps you to identify the right strategy. And then later on, the final thing is on implementation, where you put all of these things together. It's not the human nature which is the enemy of our businesses or whatever. It's not knowing about it, that we are greedy, that we are dominating others, that we like shortcuts, that we are bold when we should be cautious, that we are terrible cautious when we are bold. All of these things, right? That is what this book is about. And it's one try. It's not a, it's a try to do this. And I think the other thing is, we made this book into a course, into an online leadership course, where we want to teach this. This will go live in the next months, fall, maybe beginning of winter. It's all a labor of love on the weekends. And yeah, that's it. So yeah.
And if people, Nicolas, if they want to get in touch with you to learn more about what you do and how you could potentially help their organizations, what's the best way for them to connect?
I think the best way is just, on LinkedIn, like a lot of people I do. Yeah, that's the best.
All right. Well, we'll all go there and see your best face, the Instagram of professionals, LinkedIn, and see how amazing you are there. And I'm guessing that there's a lot of things that people can learn just by checking out your LinkedIn profile and the posts that you've made there. Spencer, if people want to connect with you, you've been helping organizations build high performing teams for decades. What's the best way for them to reach out?
You'll see all my strengths and none of my weaknesses all on LinkedIn. Just reach out to me there. Christian, he's telling stories in organizations like the International Olympic Committee and organizing committees, so that they can make better decisions all around the stories that people who work for them tell. So how can people get a hold of you so that you can help them tell the stories of their organizations?
LinkedIn as well. Just look up Christian Napier. You'll find me there. Happy to connect. So, Nicolas, thank you once again.
I thank you guys.
Really,
It was
really
fantastic.
fascinating hour.
Thank you so much. Honor is on my side, truly.
Well, sorry we
So,
don't have our outros.
and Kevin, thank you for your comments, and listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us on this journey. We really appreciate it. So check out our podcast. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you again soon.